Welcome to Ideas at Work and Beyond. We're delighted to have you join us this evening. We're going to have a special program on the new magnet school in Danbury, the Western Connecticut
Academy for International Studies.
Academy for International Studies. Our guest this evening, to my right, is Dr. Bill Glass, the Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and next to him, Dr. Sal Pascarella, our Superintendent of Schools, and next to Dr. Pascarella, we have our regular panelist, Marty Heiser, who is the chair of the Board of Finance in Ridgefield. So
no doctor before my name.
No doctor.
No earned or honorary PhD whatsoever. Just
I'm warning the audience that he has a Super Bowl message that is likely to take place at any time during the program this evening. But
and tickets.
And tickets. But for viewers tonight who are hearing the word magnet school for the first time, can you tell us what it is and why the state is encouraging this kind of educational choice and in our area?
Well, a few years ago, the Chef O'Neill was a class action suit in Connecticut, and that prompted many school systems as one of its resolutions to that case in a promissory way that the state of Connecticut would look at ways of bringing diverse cultures together. So at that time, this area, the Western Connecticut area, decided the way that they would address some of the diversity issues or lack of diversity issues in the surrounding college community of Danbury is to enter a collaborative and form a magnet school which would have students come into a diverse setting. So that was the impetus for the establishment of this magnet school. It was in response to a settlement of the Chef O'Neill agreement.
So it's one of the ways the state hopes to encourage school integration.
School integration, and right. However, as about 3 or 4 years ago, it has changed to the only responsible communities that are still addressing the resolution or the solution. They're collar counties to Hartford. Correct. Or towns, which the areas in, right here by Danbury, it's really voluntary. It's out of goodness is the right kind of programs for kids, and that's why I think they continued the establishment of the magnet school that we just opened up this year for Danbury, Brookfield, New Fairfield, Newtown, Reading, and New Milford at this time.
That's great. Now, we hear two words used with it, too, interdistrict, and that Danbury is a host community. What do we mean when we use those terms?
Well, inter and intra, let's say Danbury had our own magnet school, it'd be an inter-district magnet school. The intra-district magnet school, being that we're bringing people and students from surrounding community, we are a host magnet school. That enables us to access funding and other resources when they move into this domain. So when this initially was established, my belief, Dr. Glass was here, or just had come in, that this was going to be run by which organization?
Education Connections as an interdistrict.
As an interdistrict of all of the districts. But last year it was decided that we would be a host district for Danbury, and which puts us down the road of this host magnet with inviting towns to participate.
Is it unusual to have an interdistrict school or for schools to do things like this across town lines? I think it's wonderful.
Well, I'll let Bill speak to it, but there are New Haven, Bridgeport, the cities have moved in this direction. Out in the Saybrook area, Learn, which is a co-op that takes New London in that area. They have a similar magnet school for primary. There's some aquaculture schools that are inter-district. There's some schools along the shoreline.
So they're really specialties.
They are moving into those areas more and more. You see a lot more cooperation and reaching out beyond the boundaries of each individual district for experiences for kids.
Well, Dr. Glass, I think if someone told me 10 years ago that students from Newtown and students from Brookfield would be entering a lottery to come to school in Danbury, I'd say you were crazy.
It was a different idea.
Why is it working?
I think the reason it's working is, number one, folks recognize we are the only magnet school program in this part of the state. And we're a little bit late to the table, but in many ways that's wonderful because we've learned from others who have gone before us. Secondly, what draws people to a magnet school, it's called a magnet school because there has to be some attraction. In our case, it's international studies. If you've read Friedman's book, The World is Flat, you know that it's a smaller and smaller globe. Secondly, we have our peace curriculum, which is very, very unique for the state. The third piece is we start Spanish at kindergarten. We have all-day kindergarten programs at the magnet school, which many other school systems that are participating do not. So there are a number of things that draw people to come here. And the last thing is it's just wonderful. It gives parents a choice. All the other school systems participating, we have wonderful regard for our contiguous districts, but they also recognize this is something unique and special, so it pulls them to us.
Oh, it's wonderful. Now, you're right now at about mid-cycle in the school year, and what's the feedback you're getting from parents, from students themselves, from the staff, from sending districts? What's the feedback we're getting on the first year?
Go ahead.
They love it. They absolutely love it. The staff is really excited about it, and we have a combination of newer staff members and senior staff members, veterans. The push to become a school that encourages world languages, Spanish in this case. Approximately half the faculty are bilingual or trilingual. Helena Natowski, our principal, is trilingual. She's just a bundle of energy, and she generates this excitement. The teachers are the same way. The parents have been absolutely wonderful coming to the building and really participating, creating a culture that goes beyond Danbury. And the kids are the best. You walk through the school and kids are smiling, they're laughing. You can't tell which youngster comes from which community. It's absolutely seamless. And that for us was the litmus test to tell us whether or not this is going to be successful.
And are there certain features about the school that are most popular? I know it's brand new. That's got to be a big selling point.
It's brand new. I think one of the issues is the technology. It's a very technologically rich environment. We have smart technology, Promethean boards in the classrooms, so students are able to, if a student asks a question, we're talking about Africa, and they ask a question about a particular region of Africa, the teacher can just, on the laptop, hit the button, it comes up on the smart board. Kids can go up, they can touch it, they can move things around, they can print out the information that they get, they can, what we call e-pals, they can send an electronic email to other participants who are doing the same kinds of things. So high technology is one piece. The kids love the building because it's all based on the continents. The peace curriculum is really starting to take off. The idea of waging peace, starting with very young children, getting them to think in a peaceful manner as your natural state of being, as opposed to correcting things when they go wrong. And lastly, I think the Spanish is really a kick for a lot of the kids.
That's great.
And they're starting to speak half the language, half the sentences in English, they follow up in Spanish, and they're getting a big kick out of it.
And you have 7 continents present in one school? That's
And
great.
you can feel it in the building.
Marty, are you getting any feedback on this in Ridgefield? I know...
Yeah, I know we asked that before we started. I have to be honest in saying that it hasn't really been in the forefront. For us, I have a couple questions as well. You say there are 360 students?
Currently, there's 263.
Okay, so you're building up to the...
We're building up to we call guests. There are 85 guests from the surrounding towns.
Okay.
And this year, there's 178 of our students from Danbury.
178 from Danbury, and then of the 178 from Danbury, how are they chosen? Who gets to come to this school?
This school utilizes a lottery system.
Okay.
So what happened last year, in order to fill up the school, and we've begun the process this year, they ran a lottery, and that lottery was among all of the districts. Mm-hmm. And it ran for approximately a month, I would say. And then at the end of that month, they ran their their picks. And what they did, they created, each district had a number of openings, seats, let's call them,
Okay.
as guests. They would fill their seats, and then they would go to a waiting list.
Okay.
And then as students either accepted or didn't, they would fill it in with, the waiting list.
Yeah.
And that waiting list went to the end of December.
Okay.
And then everyone that's on that waiting list who would like to be, who did not obviously get in, they could participate in this year's lottery, and that's what we did. We sent a new lottery out, and we just closed it as of, I don't know if this is it. We just closed it yesterday. I don't have it here. And we're beginning to look at the numbers in terms of how many students. I think there's something like 600 requests, I think, among and between all the towns. The same towns. The same towns.
Okay.
The same towns, which I said was Brookfield, New Fairfield, Newtown, Reading, and New Milford.
So it's pretty competitive to get in, and it's just broken down.
It's across
essentially by a lottery.
all socioeconomic group.
Yeah.
There are no requirements about makeup. There are regular ed, there are special needs students, there are gifted students, there are bilingual students. Everybody goes into the mix.
Okay.
And because it's such a wide net, it's very reflective of the Danbury community, pretty much, in terms
It's
of
not
its makeup.
really competitive. There aren't enough slots for the people who would be interested in sending.
We have seats available, correct, that are open, but we're filling them as each district decides on how many seats they would like. We have plenty.
How did the class sizes compare to the regular schools in Danbury?
They're standard. It's the same class,
Same
class
size,
sizes. Yeah.
but it's just a little-
Let me explain. I'm sorry. I had to interrupt. It's a host magnet. It is a Danbury school, so we treat it as any other school.
Okay.
So the class sizes would be similar
Right.
across, if you went to Haystown or one of our other schools, intermediate schools, they're all similar.
But the school, from how you're describing it, it has a little bit of an uptick in technology, a little bit of the latest and greatest as far as that goes. The curriculum has been altered a little bit from the other schools in Danbury, let alone the surrounding communities.
I think, as Bill and Dr. Glass indicated, it's a thematic unit. It's a thematic school, and all of the lessons are outgrowth of that. Where other schools are much more traditional in terms of the teaching and learning. They all have technology, but not at the same extent that this school does.
Yeah.
Being that's a new school, they've had an opportunity to do some things that we haven't had in the other school system, in the other schools.
I think it's a wonderful program. I think any of this sort of revolutionary concept in education is great, and I'm really excited that you're doing it. I know for Ridgefield, we'll have literally residents storming the Board of Ed if they tweak the districts of the other schools boundaries where my daughter goes to Scotland school and you tweak that, now she has to go an extra half mile somewhere else. So I think when we're talking age groups 5 through 11, if there would be any reluctance, I think on our part, it would be just the transportation. And I was wondering,
Well,
how do you deal with that? That's got to
gonna-
be something
I was
interesting.
going to ask a larger question, which is we know that Ridgefield is not a sending district now, neither is Sherman, and neither is Bethel. And how can parents in those communities, if they have an interest in having their children attend, how can they get their school district headed in the direction of seeking an allotment of seats? The parents
Well,
themselves.
let me just deal with Ridgefield and Bethel. Sherman, I don't know much about, quite frankly.
It's north.
The superintendent is part-time, and I'm not sure but we send messages out to them as well. But I know there's been an interest on Bethel's, we've been on their radar. And in talking to them, there's been not a lot of interest. I thought there was more. Again, in fact, Gary had said there was 3 parents who have been talking about it, one that came to the board and spoke to it. In Ridgefield, there's been a number of, there has been an interest. I've talked to superintendent as recent as this week, and they're thinking about some opportunities. There's, I think, a desire to do it.
Yeah.
The questions, your question, would they mind taking this long trip?
Yeah.
And what I told them was that from the other superintendents, no one, is is complaining about a 45-minute trip, if that's what it takes to come. They get there, it's this great setting, as Bill described, and they come off happy, and they go home looking forward to come back the next day, and the trip is part of the experience. So I'm looking forward to Richfield. In the future, I'm looking forward to Bethel and maybe Sherman if they find an interest. And the way to get their attention is we send them information. If parents are interested, they should make an appointment, respectfully go to the boards. There's areas on their agenda to speak to things like that. I think everybody has to look at their individual needs and growth patterns. And but I'll tell you, there's an interest in Richfield, Bethel in the future, Sherman, I'm not sure.
I mean, there are a couple things. One, philosophically, as far as education goes, I think one thing that a magnet school does is it introduces some element of competition, if you will, into the school system. Where, well, my only choice isn't the local school. There is another option, and if this school isn't working, I can go there. And it isn't a private, parochial, have to pay for it option, but it's an option where your tax dollars are paid for. The other thing, and this is my little, not issue. It's just. It's something that I think is unfortunate, but the level of diversity in Ridgefield isn't what I think it should be. And as my kids grow up, we talked a little bit about growing up in the Chicago area. And
you were sheltered at New Trier.
That's what I'm saying. And you grew up in Evanston, and there was diversity. And you've obviously, aspired and succeeded far beyond me as a result of that diversity. I'm kind of kidding. But I think that's something that's missing. And in some of the other communities, too. I love the ethnic and cultural mix that you have in Danbury, and apparently it's reflected in the school.
It's a wonderful mosaic if you walk around our schools and witness the youngsters getting together. It really is with 37 languages, 40 spoken.
37 represented in the 200 out of
It is, and one thing about Ridgefield that we're finding out is you having a lot of people who are international moving to the Ridgefield area.
That's true.
They enjoy the idea of the national school, the language. So I think there's a real ethos and that would be there to say, we're interested in something like that. And I think Ken Freeston, the superintendent, is realizing that, and he sees the value of it as well. So that's what's engendering some discussions. So I'm hopeful.
I'm also fascinated by your peace curriculum, and my kids now are 20, 17, and 14, but I had the arduous and difficult and heart-wrenching responsibility to try to explain 9/11 and what happened there. And then night after night after night seeing on TV, what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, trying to explain to my kids growing up, why are these terrorist things going on? And now you're obviously starting at a much younger age, and I think long term that's probably the route to go. I mean, I think diversity and living together is the way to go. But how do you do that? How do you teach? Just tonight there was articles in Britain where there was a terrorist group. Now these aren't necessarily news articles or TV programs that the students your age would come and discuss. But how do you handle that? How do you handle it at a time when our nation's at war and there's, if anything but peace that they see on TV and otherwise? How do you handle that?
Maybe a better question, Marty, or another way of framing it is, how do you not handle it?
Yeah.
And I just want to back up for a moment. One of the features of the magnet school that really drew a lot of parents to it, based on our one-to-one conversations, is the whole idea of the diversity issue. And we'd be remiss if we in any way even suggested that our partnering districts or Ridgefield or Sherman or Bethel didn't have wonderful instructional programs. They do.
Yeah.
Our program, we're fortunate, a lot of people worked hard on it. It's been recognized as a state model. So the curriculum for the Danbury Public Schools in total is what's used at the magnet school. We have additional features layered on top. So that's kind of piece number one. Piece number two,
I mean, you seem to be arguing that it's a magnet school, which indicates that we're attracting people here. There must be something here, but at the same time, you're saying, well, it's really just like everywhere else, but please come, go.
I guess the core, you're right.
We're not dissing other schools just because we're saying this is a great school, but
we're proud of it. We're also proud of the other schools in the district as well. The core curriculum is the learning tree. The idea of roots, excuse me, grounding children, and the attitudes and attributes of character. The trunk represents the lifelong learning, the skills, the habits of mind that we want kids to develop, the idea of being good thinkers, of using technology, of being good communicators. And the leaves represent the content areas: English, math, science, social studies, art, music, phys ed, etc. So all of our schools have that. And we've been recognized, as I mentioned, by the State Board of Education for excellence in that area. Two things are drawing parents, I think. One is the international flavor of the district and the idea that my home district doesn't look like Danbury. I like the idea of the diversity, and Danbury looks more like the world today than my home district.
Yeah.
That's so important, Bill, because the kids, when they leave school and when they go on to post-secondary education and then go out and work, the places where they work
The real
look
world.
like
Yes, they
Danbury.
look like the magnet school. They look
And
like
we have the adults that are commingling as well. So that's an added feature, which is really, a special piece as well. And I think, as Bill said, is what's the attractiveness to it? Remember, go back to its purpose, the Chef O'Neill, and really it's about bringing diverse
People
groups
together.
together. That's his priority. If you got a strong curriculum, which Danbury does have, that's the core of what all of these special add-ons that we have that become which are everyday activities for kids. For example, we have an opportunity to work with the United Nations. We have some contacts down there. They may want to come out and visit our school when dignitaries come in. Our kids can go and we start establishing relationships, pen pals. So there's a lot of opportunity that we look for because it's very specific, whereas some of our other schools will not have that kind of like that too. So it's those kinds of things that we build on that make it, quote, that special place.
Take that and then put the peace curriculum on top of that. When you get a diverse population, my values aren't your values, Lynn. Your values aren't Marty's values. Marty's aren't Sal's, and Sal's aren't Bill's. When you bring together a diverse population, you bring a potential for a collision of cultures. Instead, let's pull them apart and say, what are the strengths, the attendant strengths within each culture, and how do we build upon that? And then the peace curriculum starts to come alive. We start with a concept called the moral imperative, which is a fancy way of simply saying, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So we start kids off, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Go on the playground, you're going to meet kids. That youngster may live in a house that's 5 times the size of your home. Does that make a difference? Actually, no, it really doesn't. And for little kids, sometimes the wow factor, but as you talk child to child, you can start to see, oh, we're very much alike in many ways. You like to play on the playground, so do I. You like to play baseball, so do I. I'll bring my ball tomorrow, you bring your bat, and we'll have a good time. We use those as very fundamental structures to start looking at the concepts that comprise the concept of waging peace. And if there's anything that makes our peace curriculum unique, it's that we aren't a reaction to an event. We try to prevent the event from occurring in the first place. Meaning, most school systems actually have character education programs. They say if there's an altercation, we have negotiation, we have mediation, we have consensus building. They're all wonderful tools. What we try to do is prevent the incident from occurring in the first place by waging peace. And our argument is that's our natural way of being. We're born into this environment, and if we don't do it right, it gets distorted, and then we end up having to use the reactionary tools. So we're trying to be very proactive, starting from a very young age, and building a new generation of kids who eventually, it was the whole concept of Gandhi, be the change you'd like to see in the world, and the idea of think globally but act locally. So it's a small little piece, but it's no less important than any other piece in the world. So we look at this as our attempt to change the world.
We had,
A very ambitious goal.
it is.
It'll be done by Thursday.
We had, I think, a real cheerleader for the magnet school on our panel last week, Matt Grimes, who is from Brookfield, and he said that he thought, I think they send a large group of students.
Brookville? Yeah, we have 38.
But I think his comment was, we save 2.5 positions by participating.
That's another way you could look at it.
Well, that's the way he looked at it, but I'm wondering if you could tell people...
Such a number cruncher, that
I
man,
know, he
you
is,
know,
but could you tell people what does it cost a sending district for a student to attend the magnet school, and do they lose their ECS grant, and what are the actual numbers that make it attractive for districts to send? He thought a very good deal.
And a great education.
And a
mind
great
you, as
education
well.
for those
The way it actually works is that there's a $1,000 tuition fee that we charge students for coming in.
And that's paid by...
That's paid by the individual district. Then the individual districts are responsible for transportation, unless we can work out some other arrangements with parents. But usually that transportation is reimbursed at about $1,350. So they get that.
Per student.
Per student, for the year. And then,
So you're saying that they pay $1,000 and they get reimbursed $1,300. That sounds like a good deal.
right, and what happens there as well, for us, if they can pay, as Brookfield found out, they send 38 students. Maybe they didn't have to add another class. They have a double savings, in essence, for that. You do not lose your ECS grant. So the state, in order to encourage it, you still apply for and get the same grant money.
So they count that student...
So they don't lose local resource dollars.
That's wonderful.
Well, this was the incentive,
win-win.
and doing, the moral imperative, doing the right thing. The legislature stepped up to the plate and said, okay, you'll receive your ECS grant. We'll give you money for transportation. Then for every student, there's a formula that they have, and we can't have any more than 25% of the students. We can only have up to 75% of students from Danbury. Okay, and the formula, which means 25% guest. The actual numbers, if the maximum reimbursement, the reimbursement's about $5,800, almost $5,900 a student from the state. And if you get them...
For Danbury students or
no,
guests?
for guests.
Guests.
So what's happening, the state's paying, let's say Brookfield, their ECS grant. They're giving almost $42,000 for transportation. So when the kids come here, the state will give us, for every 38 students, depending on the formula of our mix, the ideal mix is what they call 60%, 40%. That allows us to get full advantage of the $5,800. If you go over that 60%, then they start penalizing you. That's part of the problem that we're trying to remedy with some legislators, that piece. So we'll get almost $5,900 of students, and then we get about 90% of that money for every guest. And then for all of our students, the figure this year is about $3,200 per student from Danbury.
Why would you get less for your kids?
Because they're in-house, and also we're receiving a school.
Okay.
We own the school. We get a brand-new school with all of the technology, so we have that on our asset side.
Let me ask you, what would you get for that child to attend Roberts Avenue?
It's, I think it's around $8,200.
So you...
No, that's
Our
our
cost. We don't get anything,
cost. But we don't get anything other than the regular money from ECS, which is calculated on a sliding scale, which we get anyway, and Brookfield gets. So we get some added money to it. And the reason why there's a differential is simply because of we get the building kind of thing. So it works out financially, in a way, very well in some respects. If you calculate in here, retiring a 20-year note on $20 million, and our interest rate, it's about 11. Our percentage increase would have to reflect about, we figure, $80,000 more a month to retire $11 million debt at a 50% reimbursement. So the town of Danbury is doing well with a school with a special program, if you calculate that in there. It's about $1 million a year that we don't have to spend